Hello, everybody. This is Mr. McKeever here. Today we're going to talk about Alexander the Great. I mean, come on, look at him. Doesn't he look like a baller? Well, that's what he is. So we're going to talk about him being a baller. All right, so the story begins actually before Alexander, and it actually begins where we left off a little bit last time in class. Peloponnesian War was a disaster when it came to things for pretty much everyone that's not named Sparta. Sparta's going to be great, but unfortunately Sparta is still just Sparta, and that won't save them from Alexander. But this will begin north of Greece. It'll actually begin the territory that we call Macedonia. Today it's its own little nation, but back then it's a small northern society of people that were generally looked down upon by the Greeks. The Greeks kind of saw them as uncivilized because they didn't have philosophers and other things that made them all Greek and stuff, even though they had very similar, cultures and everything else. Moral of the story is the Greeks are not going to take the Macedonians relatively seriously, and this is going to be a significant problem for them. So, how does this play out? Well, it plays out with the guy by the name of Philip II. Philip II is going to be the Macedonian king. He's a relatively young king, 23 years old. Decides that, my goal in life is to conquer Greece. Great goal, whatever. Let's see if he can actually do it. Well, he changes something in the Greek phalanx. The phalanx is great. It's very effective. Totally destroyed the Persians and allowed the Spartans to eventually beat the Athenians. But what if we decide to not only have the phalanx, but also have horses? Seems like a novel concept. But now we have slow-moving, awesome phalanx that is like impenetrable to everything, and really fast-moving horses that kind of just kill everyone. So this change in the Greek phalanx and the Greek military is going to be a pretty dramatic change, and Greece is officially toast at this point. And it doesn't take long for some people in Greece to realize the threat Macedonia is going to pose. An Athenian orator by the name of Demosthenes is going to realize how dangerous Macedon is going to be. And he goes to the Athenian Senate and is like, hey, dude, we should totally be paying attention to what's going on here. Maybe we should raise an army. We should stop these Macedonians before it becomes too late. Well, they don't pay attention to them because they're Macedonians. Macedonians are not a problem. We've kind of owned them throughout history at this point. And they ignore the situation until it's too late. Eventually, the Athenians will team up with some of their allies to kind of face off at Chaeronea. I can never pronounce that right. Chaeronea. We'll call it that. The Battle of Chaeronea. And just get the crap kicked out of them. They should have seen this coming. Should have prepared ahead of time. Maybe, worked together with the Spartans. Done something to unify Greek efforts. Well, they don't. And the end result is welcome to now a Macedonian Greece. Philip is going to control all of Greece really quickly before the age of 25 because he's that awesome. And this is actually going to start a period of time in Greek history where Greece is not actually going to be controlled by Greece until about 1,000 years later. That's a long period of time. The one, saving grace for the Greek city-states is that Philip has no interest in directly controlling the day-to-day lives of the Greeks, as long as they all realize they are part of a Macedonian empire led by Philip. He's kind of okay with them doing their own thing, which, cool. Thanks, Philip. It's kind of nice of you. Didn't have to, but did. And it's at this point in time that really he's writing this high note in his history. He has just conquered Greece. Philip is doing this unstoppable, monsterish military thing. It's pretty fantastic for him. And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to take my next step. I've conquered Greece. I'm now going to Persia. I'm going to conquer Persia. I'm going to beat Xerxes' empire, even though Xerxes is long since dead. And then we have a problem. He's actually at the wedding of one of his sons, and a guy stabs him to death. So that's the end of Philip II. And that usually is like a pretty swift end to like a dynasty or whatever, is when you're stabbed to death at a wedding. But in this case, it's actually going to be the birthplace of something tremendous, and that is going to be the rise of his son, Alexander. Alexander is immediately going to declare himself king. He's 20 years old. By the way, Philip is a little bit older than 23 by now. He's in his, mid-30s, which still means he had a kid at 15, but that's actually pretty commonplace back then. He's going to declare himself king of Macedonia and therefore king of Greece, and history is forever changed. Alexander is one of our unique models in human history of just being better than everyone at everything he does. As a child, he's taught by Aristotle. That would be like if I got a tutoring lesson from Albert Einstein on physics. That's insane, but that's how talented Alexander was. Aristotle was approached by Philip, will you teach my son? And after meeting Alexander for the first time, he's like, yep. I mean, I pretty much am like the single greatest historical mind of the world and scientific mind of the world. But yeah, I'll tutor your son because he's pretty awesome. And Aristotle is going to teach him geography, math, philosophy, literature, science, and pretty much everything he knew, which is pretty impressive because Aristotle knew more than kind of everyone else. But here's what makes Alexander great. Is that he uses his knowledge, the knowledge of geography, his knowledge of science, his knowledge of math, all of these things to his advantage. He doesn't learn, he learns and then uses. And that's what makes Alexander so much greater than many of his contemporaries. He is an extraordinarily intellectual human being who, just happens to be good at everything else he does. Because, why not? So, first thing on his agenda list is, he's a new king, so of course there's like some revolts. Hey, maybe we can break away from this guy. So the Greek city-state of Thebes will revolt, and then he destroys Thebes, and that's about the end of that. Thebes doesn't exist when Alexander's done. He makes it pretty quick. He just, levels the city and then sells everyone off to slavery, because, yeah. That's what you do when you win at everything. You just own. And now that he's done with that, he decides that, all right, I'm going to carry out my dad's wishes. I am going to go ahead and do what he couldn't do because some dude stabbed him, and I'm going to conquer Persia. And he begins in 334 BCE. I am going to conquer Persia. Army of 35,000 people, which in comparison to some of the stuff the Persians could put together is not a lot of people, but Alexander's just better than them. So first opportunity, Granicus River, 40,000 people in the Persian army. Alexander beats him. Because he's awesome. He's got his well-trained professional army with his phalanx, with his cavalry, and he's a strategic genius. He understands battle plans and everything more than other people else around here. Well, all right. Darius now realizes that this guy is an issue. This is Darius III. He's Xerxes' grandkid, I believe. And he creates an army of 50,000 people. So now Darius and 50,000 people against Alexander, and Alexander wins then. And at this point in time, for all intents and purposes, Persia has now been conquered by Alexander. And he's done it in about a year. Largest empire in the world had seen to this point, Alexander conquers in about a year. And he's like, well, crap, what do I do now? How about this? I'll go to Egypt. Technically, this was a territory of Persia, but I'll go there and they extend it there. And he goes to Egypt. And when he goes to Egypt, he's actually viewed as a liberator, because they hated the Persians. And the Persians, didn't really allow the Egyptians to express their culture, do things like that. And he's viewed as Alexander the Liberator. And actually, Alexander is going to fall in love with Egypt. He thinks it's a great place. He visits a lot of what's remaining of some of the temples that exist out there. So while he's spending time in Egypt, Darius is like, I'm going to raise an army again, and I'm going to win back my empire. And he creates a massive army, 250,000 people. And they meet up at the Battle of Gaugamela. And Alex wins. In fact, he breaks the lines, and we're not going to really care about the battle plans too much. He breaks the lines of the Persian forces and sends his cavalry straight through just to go after Darius. It's like, all right, I'm coming after you, dude. You keep raising these armies. I'm done with it. I am coming after you. And Darius just runs. He bolts, and as soon as he bolts, the army just falls apart, and they all start fleeing, and the Macedonian/Greek army just destroys them. And that is the end of the Persian Empire. Darius should realize that he was just not going to win, and that's just how it works. Well, he eventually does, and eventually Darius will actually be killed by one of his own men because they just don't respect him anymore, and officially Persia is now part of the Alexandrian Empire. So now he's conquered Persia. He has Greece, Macedon, Egypt. What's next? How about something no one has even fathomed before? Let's go to India because, again, why not? It's a great idea. Funds. So he is going to travel to India, and he will actually wage a war against the Indians in that area, the actual Indians, the Indian army. And it's a massive battle that takes place at the Hydaspes River. And what's actually really neat about this, and again, something that's, not crucial to understanding the importance of Alexander, but the Indian army actually uses elephants. And he realizes that, wow, elephants are extraordinarily dangerous to soldiers. I am not going to send my soldiers after elephants. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attach like bladed spokes to my chariots. And I'm going to have the bladed spokes just run circles around the elephants. And it's actually going to cut up the legs of the elephants. The elephants fall down, and the soldiers on top don't really know how to deal with this, and he kills all the soldiers. Because, why not? That's great. Another added advantage of this is that elephants are slow, and the chariots just go right by them. Elephants don't know how to respond to that. Look at that! Alexander outsmarted everyone again. Again, he's using his ideas, his knowledge of science, of geography, and everything else to show how fantastic he is. And at this point in time, he's just going to be like, all right, dude, I'm done. Travels for another 200 miles, doesn't see another, worthwhile competitor or anything to fight against, so he decides to go home. And it's not because Alexander loses. He has never lost a conflict his entire life. He wins at everything. He is the epitome of winning. He decides he's done. All right, I guess I should go rule my empire now. It's the largest anything anyone has ever seen. And by the way, he's like 33 years old. And he will finally go back to Babylon. He's like, all right, dude, I gotta figure out what to do with this. He's like, I'm gonna build some roads. I'm gonna build cities. It's gonna be extraordinary. It's this entire list of things he's going to do to improve his massive empire. And unfortunately, something happens. He gets a fever and dies. Guy got sick. And he died. It's the end of Alexander the Great. But his impact is legendary. The impact of Alexander the Great will change the world. He will introduce Greek concepts to Persian cultures. And it's not just Persian culture, but it's Persian, Indian, and Egyptian. All of them become introduced and start mixing amongst themselves. What are the best parts of each and everything? And this becomes what we call Hellenistic culture. It's an entirely new culture that exists in the world now because of Alexander. He brings ideas across the empire. Egyptians learn from the Greeks learn from the Egyptians, the Persians learn from the Egyptians, the Persians learn from the Greeks, the Indians learn from the Greeks realize the Indians exist. It's all new, it's great. But the empire itself doesn't stay intact. Macedonia will become its own empire along with the Greek city-states. Egypt will become its own empire again, and Persia will become / India its own empire. But these will all be led by generals in Alexander's army. It's divided amongst each group. But the impact of Alexander is extraordinary. His empire will serve as inspiration for many of the greatest leaders in human history. Julius Caesar is envious that he's never able to accomplish what Alexander does. Napoleon Bonaparte, probably the greatest conqueror of the modern age, will at one point in time go to Egypt, and at the foot of the pyramids he will weep because he cannot accomplish what Alexander did 2,000 years prior. He's Alexander the Great. He did things that no one had ever done in human history before. Things that no one will ever replicate again. He is brilliant tactician, brilliant leader, generous to his people. And that is why he's given the name Alexander the Great.